Good morning. Today is Tuesday, October 11, 2016. This is the regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioners Johnson, Sobroff, Figueroa Villa, McLean Hill, and Goldsmith are present, and we have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we go to the consent agenda items, I want to remark on the events of last week. So this past week was tragic for law enforcement in California. 3 brave officers lost their lives in the line of duty, protecting and serving their communities. I'm sure I speak for this entire commission when I say our hearts are broken and we express our deepest condolences to all of those touched by the murder of these officers.
What about the youth you killed?
Right here in Los Angeles County, Deputy Steve Owen, a 29-year veteran of the Sheriff's Department, was brutally gunned down while responding to a burglary call. He was a Medal of Valor recipient, volunteered as a football coach in the community, and by all accounts, set a great example for community policing. In Palm Springs, 2 officers tragically lost their lives responding to a domestic disturbance call. Officer Jose Gilbert Gil Vega had a 35 years of service and was going to retire this December. Officer Leslie Zarembny was a 27-year-old mother of a 4-month-old baby who had just returned to work following maternity leave. We also extend our prayers to a 3rd officer who suffered gunshot wounds. Our thoughts and prayers are with the families, loved ones, and friends of the 3 officers who bravely went into harm's way to protect and serve their community.
Thank you for that.
Any of my fellow commissioners have anything to say this morning?
Yes, Commissioner Johnson, thank you.
Thank you.
My comments relate to last week as well, and in particular to public comment following the chief's report. Our meeting adjourned before all of the speakers could conclude their remarks, leaving no opportunity for members of the commission to react to some particularly disturbing comments. Words have power. That is evident in the visceral reaction to and the galvanizing effect of the simple truth that Black lives matter. It's because words have power, and because the words spoken in this room are amplified well beyond these walls, that any statement which promotes, endorses, or otherwise appears to condone an act of violence directed at law enforcement officers or any members of this department must be rejected unequivocally and in the strongest possible terms. Every man and woman that wears an LAPD uniform is someone's child, and in many cases, someone's spouse, sibling, or parent. I'm sure that their loved ones pray that they make it home safely at the end of each shift, and so do we. Likewise, every member of the public that officers encounter and engaged is a loved one to someone, son or daughter, parent or spouse, and reverence for their life must also be of paramount concern. I am deeply committed to the proposition that everyone who comes here to speak should be heard. No matter how sharp and withering the rhetoric, I intend to continue to do my best to listen with both open mind and an open heart. That said, it is my firm conviction that at the end of the day, it will take a combination of grace and a sincere recognition of our common humanity for anything approaching the transformation that many seek to take hold. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Any other statements this morning?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. We're now on number 1, consent agenda items. We have cards on A, C, F, and H. Would you like
Do any
me
of
to-
my fellow commissioners want any of the other consent items pulled?
No.
Do I have a motion to approve items 1B, D, E, G, I, and J?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, let's call the speaker for item 1A, please.
Okay, for 1A, we have Agustin Sabata and the Red Chief. And this is relative to a monetary donation in the amount of $600.
First off, I have a question for, I guess it's for Chief Beck. Who gave the green light for the massacre of a week and a half ago? 4 people in 1 weekend, 2 children, and you people don't give a damn about that.
This item relates
And in the
to,
case,
this item relates to a monetary donation from the Dodgers, if you have a comment about that.
hey, let me speak, would you, Mr.
I
Johnson?
will let you speak on this
The
item.
lady here asked me that anybody here could speak, and I'm speaking on this issue. In the case of Daniel Perez, who was gunned down in front of his classmates, and now the police and the whole city,
You're off topic, sir.
even, be quiet, Mr. Johnson.
You're off topic.
I don't care, I got my chance to speak. My name was called, and I want to speak, okay?
You get to
Hey.
speak on the agenda item.
This is the agenda item, the agenda of death, promulgated by yourselves.
Call the next speaker,
The green
please.
light was probably given by Beck
Your-
to kill
your
The
4
next
time is-
people.
speaker,
your
please,
time
the
on
Red
this item
Chief.
is
You guys
forfeited.
figured that the movement
Sir, your
against
time on this
police
item is
abuse was getting
forfeited.
too strong, and
Please
you,
have a seat.
all you are is a kiss ass, so shut the fuck up.
Please have a seat, or you'll be asked to leave.
Johnson, no, I'm not, take me away, and I don't care. You know, you're against blacks,
Okay,
you're against
now-
Chicanos,
now
you're
you
against
need to
everybody.
leave- You need to leave
So
the,
you don't
you
care
need to
what
leave the
happens
meeting,
to us,
sir.
all you care about is your stupid little
Sir, you need to
agenda.
leave the meeting.
And the thing is, you know.
If you don't
I-
leave the
I-
meeting voluntarily, then we'll be forced to take a recess, and all these people who've come down here to speak to this
You're gonna
commission
put-
today
See, hey,
will not
what
have
the
the
hell is that?
opportunity.
You're doing that as a Chicano gets up here to speak.
The next
before,
speaker.
You know, you do it with the black person that speaks out.
Sir.
Now it's because the Chicanos are
Sir,
standing up to
you
you,
need to
and your
leave
bullshit.
the
Is that
meeting.
what it is, Mr. Johnson? And sometimes when I speak, you go out the door because you're afraid to listen to what I have to say. The main thing that I have to say right now, I will give $25 for anybody who will buy this building if they believe what the police are putting out about Daniel Perez's death, that he committed suicide by police. First they kill him, shoot him down, and then they pick his pocket and they say, we found a note that he wanted to commit suicide. I will give you $5 for this building if you believe that shit.
Taking a 5-minute recess.
Bye.
When we reconvene, okay. Sir, you need to leave the meeting. And we're not restarting until you leave the meeting.
Take the recess. They don't take the recess.
If we take the recess and we come back and we have another interruption,
Let us be quiet. I need to talk.
okay, everybody have a seat, please. We have order, please. Can we have order, please? Please. We have a very long agenda. We have many items on the regular agenda. We have the chief of police's report, where you can essentially comment on virtually anything related to policing. We have general public comment, where you can comment on pretty much anything relating to policing. There's plenty of opportunities to have your voices heard. On the agenda items, whether it's consent items or regular items, we want to get through these items. There are important items for us to discuss. There are important items for the public, I would expect, to hear and maybe have some thoughts about, but we have to stay on topic when we're on these items. If you are off topic, I'm going to ask you to either get back on topic, and if you don't, you're going to forfeit your time. And if I give you multiple warnings, I'm going to give one warning. If you don't get back on topic, or you don't have a seat after I've asked you to have a seat, then I will ask you to leave. Okay, call the next speaker, please.
The Red Chief.
Just a little bit about rule decorums. Topic for a lot of people that they don't understand the agenda. Sorry about that, Matt. You lost my vote of approval. Here's what I really want to say though about the Dodgers and the $600. It really don't mean nothing to these people. You guys get donations anyway, $600. What you guys gonna do with it? You guys not gonna feed nobody here. You guys just give it to the Dodgers, or the Dodgers gonna give it back to you guys. So for traffic to eat or whatever, that's a fucking whole bunch of bullshit that you guys got on the agenda to discourage these people from talking. Stop the bullshit and get down to the meat of the meeting.
There are no other comment cards for this item.
Do I have a motion to approve item 1A? Motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
I'll second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Okay, and one comment card for 1C, we have Tut Hayes. And this is relative to a monetary donation in the amount of $50.
This is 1C.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Relative to the donation of a luncheon valued at $3,673.65.
Domestic abuse is one of the most dangerous calls the officer can respond to. I didn't know this particular response team had a police element in it, but since it does, it's important to understand that most response teams are in the aftermath. They're not the immediate, what we call first responders. And so I wonder whether there's a delay factor before the officers and the actual team arrives at the scene of the domestic abuse. That's what's curious. I haven't had an opportunity to look at the memorandum in the back. I'll do that, find out whether that discloses any information about the method in which these teams operate. But that's a very important team, I understand. And I'm familiar with this to some extent, and I'd certainly like to know more, and would certainly like to know how it functions, how it operates. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have no other comment cards on this item?
We do not.
No, sir.
Mr. T-Fang, can you coordinate with the security about getting those empty seats filled, please? Thank you. I will move to approve item 1C. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you.
Okay, we're now on item 1F. We have Akili, and this is relative to a monetary donation in the amount of $2,310.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are no
I'll
other
move to
comment-
approve item, you said there was no more comments?
No
right?
more, sir.
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed?
Okay, we're now on 1H.
1H.
Don Brown. This is relative to a monetary donation in the amount of $840.
Don Brown.
He's on his way up.
Oh, great. Take your time.
Sorry about those Red Sox.
Mr. Johnson,
Good morning.
good morning. I made a mistake on what I did with that card, but my thing is, there was a meeting in South Central LA that you came to, and everybody came out of there happy. Everybody came out of there happy.
I
And I know I'm off talking. I'm sorry, but
please,
I had to say that. Everybody came out and really
Thank-
was
thank you,
appreciated
but please-
there were some of the members came out and talked to the people in the community.
Thank you.
We're real happy
Please,
about it.
please, I appreciate it, but please submit a card for public comment and
I'll
make your
have my
statement.
glasses and I'm taking a bunch of chemo right now.
Okay.
Okay, I have another one with G something on it.
I will change this card to public comment, sir.
We'll change the card for you.
Community is not against you.
Thank you.
Some things is being done.
I'll move to approve item 1H. Do I have a second? Do I have a second?
Oh, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. We're now on item number 2, regular agenda items.
Mr. President,
Can we please have order? Can we please have order?
Mr. President, the
Yes, Mr. T. Fink. Okay, order, please. Sir? Okay. Let's have order, please. Let's have order, please. Order, please. Thank you. Can we have order, please? Sir, please have a seat. Please. Please. We have. If I kicked everyone out that did that, I'd be kicking 10 people out every meeting. Can we please have order? Sir, please settle down and so we can regain order. Mr. T. Fank, did you have a comment that you wanted to make?
yes, Mr. President, the Inspector General has requested that item 2D be continued to October 25th. So that item is removed from the agenda.
To F.
No,
I mean,
2D.
2D.
2D is in David.
Got it, D. There were 3 items that I did not personally think we needed a report on, but if items 2A, 2F, and 2H, did any of my fellow commissioners
We
want
do
to
have
report on
comment
those
cards on those.
items? We have cards on all of them?
We have cards on 2A, B, C, D, E, and F.
What about 2H?
No.
Did anybody want to report on item 2H?
Nope.
Okay, can I have, I'll move to approve item 2H. Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nope.
Okay. So I think we need a report on item 2A so we can call the comments on item 2A.
Okay, sir. The first 4 speakers, Trevor Gerard.
Excuse me, sir, we have a police officer in community roles. I'm sure you all don't want to break the rules.
There's no rules about where police officers can sit. Hold on. We have moved the agenda items, sir, please, sir, please have a seat. Sir, please have a seat. We've moved the agenda items up, so when officers are done with their report, they will leave, which will free up seats. So people that are outside will be here to be here on the chief's report and on public comment. After his agenda item, or her agenda item.
We have 7 comment cards on 2A.
Please call the comments, please.
The first 4 speakers, Trevor Gerard, Miriam Nicole, Melina Abdullah, and Michael Williams. This is relative to commission liaison and assignments.
So speaking of divide and conquer, I went to a meeting last night that Matt Johnson spoke at, and I just want to say, so during this meeting where McLean Hill and Shane Murphy were also present, which I understand is a violation of the Brown Act in itself. So anyway, Matt Johnson spoke to the fact that the mayor has no disciplinary power over the police. The commission actually has no disciplinary power over the police. And Charlie Beck
Sir,
is,
this item relates to the commission liaison assignments.
which is what exactly?
There's a public report that's available online. It is all available to the public. When the agenda is posted on Friday, there are links to every report. The commission liaison assignments relates to the subcommittees that the commissioners are assigned to. So please speak to that item. If you have a general comment, please save it for general public comment.
Okay. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, that meeting was part of the liaison, so I'm going to continue to speak. So what we're talking about
you don't
is
get to
zero.
make that determination.
So what we're talking about is zero accountability. Oh, but I'm doing it. If you want to stop me, you can bring your goons and come and stop me. Otherwise, I'm going to continue to speak. Which is it?
If you speak on topic, then I will let you speak.
Right.
If
So I'm
you're
talking
off
about the
topic,
liaison where you came to the meeting yesterday and you spoke with the community.
that has nothing to do with this item.
So we're talking about a zero accountability culture, right? Which is the gateway to lawlessness.
Okay, sir,
We're being told.
you're off topic. Please have a seat.
We're being
Call the
told
next speaker,
that the
please.
burden is on us. So we're not to use. Are you going to cut my mic off? So we're being told as a press team.
Sir, please have a seat.
On us. They're the ones who are engaging in state-sanctioned violence.
Sir, if you don't have a seat,
It's their
I'm
job.
going to ask you to leave.
We're being told as private citizens that we're the ones who aren't supposed to say certain things, right? But they're not being told that.
Please have a seat, sir.
Right? They're not the ones who are going to be fired. They're going to kill your children, our mothers, our brothers, our sisters, and then continue to have a job.
Sir, you need to leave the meeting. Sir, I'm asking you to leave the meeting now.
What if I sit down? What are you going to do?
No, you need to leave the meeting.
What if I sit down? What are you going to do?
If you sit down, then we're going to take a recess until you leave.
You all are playing a joke. Y'all a joke. He disrupted the meeting for 5 minutes, and he talks out of order, and you kicked him out, and he wasn't even talking off topic. You just didn't want to listen to what he had to say.
I'm happy to listen to what he says when he speaks on the item.
About the liaison, but you didn't listen and give him
Mr.
time.
Williams, you're disrupting the meeting. Please have a seat. Yes, you are. Everyone that's standing, please have a seat. Please have a seat so we can continue with the meeting.
You're a fucking joke.
Please have a seat so we can continue the meeting.
I got arrested for the same thing. I'm not gonna sit down and you're not gonna be putting us out. That's right. I will stand from here and talk. I will stand from
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute recess.
Take the recess. Take the recess. Take the recess. Why are you forcing the people to sit down? Don't spit. So you follow the masters every time. Really? Like you run out here with the master. Put us all out. Put us all out. You let some people
Hey, can we have order, please? Can everyone have a seat, please, so we can? Everyone needs to please have a seat so we can. Everyone, please have a seat.
I'm waiting, Matt Johnson.
Can everyone please have a seat?
I'm waiting.
There are about 15 people that are still standing. If everyone can please have a seat, we can get started. There's 15 people standing. If everyone has a seat, I can see who's disrupting and we can deal with it. Can everyone please have a seat, including you? Can everyone, if either please either leave the room or have a seat.
Everybody else would sit down. You are stupid. You are not doing what you're supposed to do. But you kicked Trevor out. But he in here starting all kind of problems and you ain't kicked him out yet. How much did you
I know the people in the back of the room are want to see what's going on, but I cannot see what's going on in the back of the room unless everyone has a seat. Can you please have a seat? I will deal with it if everybody can have a seat and I can see what's going on.
But he's not cooperating, so you're not going to kick him out. That part. Why you want to kick him out? Why are you not? No. Let's talk about this.
Everybody, please have a seat. Can you please have a seat so I can see what's going on? Or I can ask everyone that's standing, either have a seat or I'm going to ask you to leave.
It's the same person that was sitting over there.
Can the people?
He's leaving.
All right, everybody please have a seat. We're gonna restart the meeting. Had we gone through the comments on item 2A?
No, sir. The next speaker, Miriam Nicole, followed by Melina Abdullah.
Sir, can you please have a seat?
All right.
Hold the
Hi.
clock.
So
Hold the
I
clock.
am learning. I'm trying.
Hold the clock.
Oh.
Ma'am, hold on 1 second.
You put Trevor out for no reason, and you know it. Yet you let this go on.
Sir, if you can,
I'm not sitting down.
you need to have a seat.
I'm not sitting down.
Please have a seat.
No.
Then please leave the room.
No, and I'm not going to do that either.
Then we are going,
Arrested me
then
once
we are,
and you think I don't care. I don't care.
we are, if you don't,
I was in prison when you were born.
sir, if
So I
you
don't
don't
care
leave,
about that. What you did was unnecessary and wrong.
sir, please leave the room.
No.
If you don't leave,
You put Trevor out for no
okay.
reason. You let this man go on.
We're going to recess to closed session. Please clear the room. The room is being disrupting.
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss item number 5A1 in accordance with Government Code 54957. We're ready? Okay. The Board of Police Commissioners has completed its work in closed session. Item number 5A1 was discussed, and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. We are now back in open session for item number 2A.
Pursuant to California Code 54957.9, the meeting room is cleared due to disruptions that prevented the board from continuing the meeting and conducting its business. The room has been cleared. Do I have a motion to continue in session with only the media present?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right, let's go to the consent item agendas. Which items were, had we not approved?
The only item that was approved was H.
Was H?
Yes.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve items 1A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I, and J?
Excuse me, Mr. President, you continued item D, so we need a motion to continue item D.
Mr. President, I think you're confusing the consent with the regular agenda.
Oh,
We've
did we
already
finish?
dealt with the
I'm
consent
sorry.
agenda.
I'm
So you're,
sorry.
you're looking at the regular agenda
Got it,
items.
Got it, okay, never mind. Okay, so on the regular agenda,
Item 2D was approved, and we need a motion to continue item 2D.
okay, do we have a motion to continue item 2D? Do we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And
Madam Secretary, was that E or D?
D.
D.
D as in David?
D
Okay,
as in
thank you.
David, sir.
And then item 2A, do we have a motion to approve item 2A?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So we will, for now, we will skip items 2B and C. And if we could go to item 2E, please.
Okay, item number 2E, Department's verbal report and discussion relative to the interaction with Los Angeles Unified School District in gang prevention education.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Commander John Sherman of the Office of Operations, and I'm going to speak to you this morning relative to the LAPD's relationship with the Los Angeles Unified School District, their police department, and some of our gang intervention programs and some of our youth programs in general. This is a brief overview of some of those efforts with the overarching focus on gang prevention, but also on the positive impact on youth in the community. Each of these programs I'm going to speak of could be covered in 30 minutes or an hour, and I'm going to try to spend just a few moments to give you a flavor of the programs. Some of these programs are department-wide all over the city. Other programs are unique at the area command level and are handled individually based on the specific needs of each community. And some of these programs are deeply rooted with the LA Unified School District. Some are rooted closely with the school police, and some of them are more subtly connected with the school district and more rooted with the community in general. What I'd like to do is first talk about some of the programs with the school district. We have the Police-Oriented and Preparation Program, which is an associate's degree program for young adults that you may be aware of. It's a program with the school district, as well as the Los Angeles Community College District and West LA College. We have 12th graders and beyond that work on associate's degrees, and we have about 117 students that are in that program focusing towards a law enforcement career. It's a significant feeder pool for our academy. We also have the Los Angeles Police Academy Magnet Schools. That's a program that occurs within high schools and middle schools throughout the city, and it's a focus on the young people that have an interest in serving their community as well as serving the police department. Their motto is preparing to serve in support of the Los Angeles Police Department's motto. It's academically and physically rigorous, and it has a very successful graduation rate, much higher than the normal graduation rate within the school program. And then we also have safe passages.
Is there more than one school?
I'm sorry, sir?
Is there more than one school?
Yes, sir. There are 4 high schools and 2 junior high schools, and the locations.
A couple in the valley, aren't there?
There's a
Yeah.
couple in the valley, and
Yeah, Reseda is where the,
one is in Reseda High School, Monroe High School. I want to say Wilson, and I'm not finding my. Somebody's helping me in the back there? San Pedro's the other one, San Pedro High School, and two junior high schools, 2 middle schools. Again, a very successful program. It's been around since 1996, and we are deeply rooted in that program. We provide both some of the academic advisors as well as police officers at every program. We also have our Safe Passages, which is a kind of an overarching program that deals with a lot of different parts of the community, including the school district, school police, parents, residents, and stakeholders within the community. The idea being trying to give kids a safe place to either be in the parks or going to and from school, and have a police presence and a positive influence for their school experience. After we leave the school program, we have what I consider more of the area-based programs. I think most of you are aware of our Cadet Leadership Program, which is over 8,000 strong. It is a program that instills leadership, character, physical discipline, and so on, and is active all over the city of Los Angeles. Interestingly, it's also very active within the Los Angeles School District Police Department. They have several posts.
what I think it's interesting is at the graduations that for each cadet, there are 20 support members, and not just their immediate families, but their people are celebrating what these kids are doing. So the last one I went to, I think there were 10,000 people in attendance
At the Galen Center.
celebrating the,
They are remarkable milestones for these young people. And there is now a parental component where we also provide, I believe it's 10 weeks of training for parents of a
fantastic.
similar nature related to the leadership training that the cadets get. We also have, in many of our areas, a Jeopardy program that is specifically targeted to at-risk youth, specifically youth that are in jeopardy of getting into gangs or getting into trouble, and those are handled at the area level, some of them on school grounds, some of them at other locations, to help targeted individuals that, with their parents' permission and their willingness to get involved in the program, to help focus on staying away from gangs. We have the Juvenile Impact Program, which is a.
Could you talk a little bit more about the Jeopardy program?
I'm sorry, ma'am?
Would you talk a little bit more about the Jeopardy program? What services you provide?
The Jeopardy program, in general, is an after-school program. It is something where maybe a garden variety example might be if someone's brother is a gang member and we have a younger brother in the family that we want to move into a program, or their family wants to move into a program, so they can get a different influence other than the gang influence that might be in their neighborhood or in their family. Also, sometimes that would occur with a first arrest of somebody, where our officers may arrest somebody and that it's their first time getting involved with the criminal justice system, and they need maybe just to be pointed in a different direction. And we typically get referrals to the program at the varying levels, and then when they assuming that the person is willing and the parental involvement is willing, then they come into a program that is, and it varies by area to area. We currently have 9 commands in the city that run a Jeopardy program, but typically they're 1 or 2 days a week where they'll meet at a YMCA or at a high school in a side room, or some other location where they meet with police officers, and we do things like sports activities, tutoring, mentoring, things like that. Just a program to give this group of kids that are potentially problematic, a different avenue. That answer your question, ma'am?
Thank you, yes.
The juvenile impact program is a little different type of program. It's typically when it's strongly and only supported by parents. It's got strong supervision by the police department, where we have a much more rigorous program of discipline and self-esteem for young people to get them pointed in the right direction. This is currently being run in 2 commands within the city, and has been around for a significant period of time, and has a strong component of educating the parents. And I mentioned that on this one, but there are a couple of these, and I mentioned about cadets, where we're really trying to give some education and some information to the parents also. The Police Activity League supporters, or PALs, is another group. This is typically a younger group, typically not youths that are at risk or in jeopardy of getting into gangs. It's, again, typically an after-school program, and is run at various locations. Some of them are in the police stations. Some of them are at schools or boys and girls clubs, where police officers will interact with the young people in and again, an after-school type program to get them headed in the right path. And then Beat the Streets is a relatively new program that's run, I believe, in 2 police stations, specifically with LA Unified School Police officers. And it's a wrestling-focused program, again, with the idea of getting them something positive to do where they're off the streets. And then I know that you're all very aware of the Community Safety Partnership Program. That is a program we have with the Housing Authority, and we foster our relationships in the housing communities, 5 of the housing communities in the city. And this has a significant focus on young people. I know you've heard much about our football program and the
Watts Bears.
scouting program and so on. I'm sorry?
Watts Bears?
Watts Bears. And that program obviously has been very successful the last 5 years. And then our JJCPA grant, we are the recipients of a state grant where our bureaus and our areas receive state funding for overtime details, where they can go out and focus specifically on locations that have been identified as potential problem locations, but all centered around schools, either high schools or middle schools, where we put police officers out on the street to either create those safe passages so people can, the young people can be safe going to and from school, and/or areas where there's signs of violent crime or juvenile crime, where we can impact the crime. And then my conversation with Chief Zipperman, Chief Zipperman's the chief of the LA Unified School Police. I spoke with him last week, and he wanted me to specifically mention the youth services program that he has running. He works very, very closely with our YSO program, both at the department level as well as at all the areas and his 4 bureaus, and works very closely with the police department. And with that, I know I went through it very, very fast. If I could entertain any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
How do you integrate GRID into all these programs, the Mayor's GRID program? I know you do, we work with and have a partnership with Mayor's GRID.
And I don't know, I know each of the areas have a relationship with their grid, and I know that each of these areas have some form of these juvenile programs. And I don't know that I can give you an example of how they work together in connecting the dots, or with interventionists coming into the programs. I'm having a vague recollection of a Jeopardy program that I ran once, that we did have an interventionist come in and speak with the kids, but I don't know if that's wholesale or done at any larger level. But I know that the chief's vision, Chief Beck's vision, and Chief Moore's vision on our relationship with GRID rolls down to the area commands, and I know the area commands are the commands that run most of these programs.
Commissioner, probably the best example is Summer Night Lights, and the cadets are very, very involved in all the Summer Night Lights locations, all the parks. They're a big piece of the department's interconnection with the youth and the GRID, and I think that the GRID also in using their survey instrument where they identify at-risk youth. They will use our programs as a feeder pool for that, and also they can refer to us particularly for the Jeopardy program and things like that.
And I would just, Assistant Chief Mike Moore, Officer of Operations, I would add that, as you know, the GRID program has both prevention as well as intervention, hardcore intervention, and then the prevention side is where we frequently see at the area level the conversations with the contract providers that are providing tutoring, violence, anger management, ESL, other parenting programs, and the youth service officer and the at an area station will be aware of those and will look to, as Commander Sherman indicated, referrals. So first-time offenders or family violence, like with the DART program, where you have children that are at risk or potentially at risk. And again, we look to put a safety net there and weave those together. So it's a lot of different hands, but all geared to programming that, unfortunately, many times there's limitations, so that we have to shop and find the right program that can address the needs of this particular situation. So that's where, again, the importance of the CPAB and the importance of the relationship between the captains and the area providers and those community groups and the GRID coordinators is understanding where are the gaps, where are areas that we have further capacity, and develop that.
Thank you.
I've known a lot about these different programs separately, but when you combine them and you look at surrounding at-risk, underserved kids with these kinds of opportunities instead of gangs, drugs, negativism, and the kinds of things that they're surrounded by. In its entirety, what LAPD is a service provider. Just like the finest charities, philanthropic service providers in Los Angeles. And in its entirety, you're dealing here with 15 or 20,000 kids. The biggest service providers, the most successful service providers, 1,000 kids at once, 2,000 kids at once, budgets of $5 million, $7 million, great programs. But the idea, when you talk about, when you expand policing to this role as a major, probably unparalleled service provider in Los Angeles, I think it's a very, very big deal and gives me a lot of hope for the future.
Well, thank you. I would comment two things. LA Unified School District, as an institution, is a tremendous partner with us, and they carry the bulk of the care and welfare and development of these children. And our integration, not just with Chief Zipperman and the police, but also the administrators, is key to that success. Additionally, probation department is, again, another major partner with us because of community-based organizations that are under contract to help and assist and support families that have at-risk youth and are seeing behaviors that are going down the wrong path. But all of this, I did use a safety net. The integrating and weaving of this together is critical. What is different in Los Angeles than other cities, I believe, is what you've just echoed, which is the investment by this organization under Chief Beck and his predecessors to strengthen and deepen our engagement, not just from an enforcement or an intervention standpoint, but from the prevention standpoint.
But the other side of it is so efficient. And the privileged who don't have empathy for the people that were pulling these 20,000 kids need to know more about it and need to know that supporting it versus buying 6 new cars or 5 new paintings or something is something that can be done. This is a saving grace. I really congratulate you on the depth of it. And I've never really thought about it in its entirety versus program by program by program.
Question? Yeah, I just have a quick question, because what you have presented is very broad and encompasses, to your point, Chief Moore, a lot of moving parts. So I'm interested in, and if you can respond now, that would be great. If not, we can certainly discuss it later. But I'm interested in challenges that we may have, and your thoughts about what we might be able to do to facilitate, consistency and even stronger integration of the various programs and partners across the range of the commands that are dealing with this or that are involved.
And, I would respond that if what you look at, when you describe the department's school-based programs, we have some major pistons, that being the magnet program, the POP program, that have foundations, that have efforts that can support, and the department has invested, full-time resources without funding. The area level programming is the one that's particularly at risk, whether it be the impact program, a Jeopardy. Those two programs there are, as the commander indicated, they're not universal because they require a community partnership that has sufficient funding that can perpetuate a program, week after month after year. We've seen strong examples, for instance, in Devonshire, their youth center that garnered support by local councilmen and others to find a way to get a permanent facility, and then programming dollars. But even that, which is a best of breed, if you will, still struggles to maintain its ability to provide services. When you move all the way down to, say, Rampart area or Hollenbeck or some of the other commands that have had stronger years than others, the recurring tone is the department is invested. We've assigned unbudgeted resources to staff and provide our support, our flywheel of momentum, I'll call it. But where the lacking of it is community-based organizations and philanthropic capabilities that can really step in and help provide services, because you can only use interns so much. And Commissioner Figueroa well understands in maintaining your programming that you have. You are literally stitching together continually how do you provide programming the next 6 months, the next year, the next 2 years. And our Jeopardy and Juvenile Impact programs have the similar challenge. Now, we've been blessed. Police Foundation has supported the Juvenile Impact program with hundreds of thousands of dollars of support. We have a good partnership with LA Unified, so teachers and professional counselors are there, but the momentum is challenged by the headwind of these are not budgeted areas.
Right.
These are areas that the entrepreneurial spirit is needed at the area level and by a community to see success.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Chief, you didn't, when I've gone around the city to some of these events, you have many businesses involved in many of the programs.
We do, and
Wanting to raise money, yeah, go ahead.
So there are. The challenge is you need more. As you know, in fundraising, these are expensive activities. The cost behind programming can run into hundreds of thousands of dollars, and so it's not. I don't mean to suggest that there's not that there's a lack of grassroots effort. It's just the organizing of that and the development of really deep silos in fundraising where you can build a trust. Many of our areas would love to have a trust or a development where they have a nest egg sufficient that it could perpetuate from one period to the next. And that, I think, is a challenge throughout many of our endeavors.
And I think that the commission sees it every week. If you look through your donations that you approve, the vast majority of them go towards our youth programs. And they come from businesses, they come from community members, they come from police officers, they come from all aspects. So, I think we have a lot of people that are involved, but I think that given the breadth of our programs, we could use, if the commission's asking, we could use some big signature donors, The
Ray Charles Foundation is huge.
Yeah, well, they've.
Oh, Ray Charles is, we have, you talk about the Weintraubs, or you talk about Ray Charles. We have some huge donors. Without Roberta we wouldn't have the magnet schools. You know,
Right.
those magnet schools are a fantastic opportunity for young people, even if they don't become police officers. It's a great school. They have high 90 percentile graduation rate. They can go straight in and get their AA while they're still in high school. It's a great program. I invite the commissioners to go see it because we run one of them at our Manchester training facility. And so actually we have kids going to high school with recruits going through the police academy, which is a pretty interesting duality. So a lot of opportunities, and I invite any of the commissioners to go look at these, and if you have ways to leverage folks into supporting them, I think it's a great way to support the youth of Los Angeles, because obviously that's the future of this city.
Thank you.
Great job.
Okay, we do have one comment card from Mr. Ted Hayes.
The elephant in the room is that the LA Unified School District has a police force. I can assure you they know more about dealing with children of every category and every aspect than these LAPD officers ever shall. I don't like this at all. I don't know who in LA Unified allowed this to occur, but I can assure you it will be retracted. You have a wrestling program. Gray Davis took the weights out of prisons because Kookie Williams was buff and big beyond belief, and so were many of the prisoners. So now we won't have pushing and shoving like kids do. We'll have them taking each other down, flattening one another with a wrestling program. Look, I'm irate. I really am. I seldom get upset, but LA Unified Youth School District used to be my second besides the police department. So I know a little bit about them. And I know very well whether you got a grant to initiate this program, however you came with this concept, the police should not be in elementary schools, 8 years old. We shouldn't have not LAPD, but police, yes, of course. So I've seen the program. I'm going to look at the information you have on it, study it. I hope I can speak to an officer or two about this before I go to people who will initiate some attempt to reverse this. I can assure you that black kids are going to be predominant in your program. There's no question about that. They're the ones who are being expelled, the ones who are difficult in the classroom. Now, in California, kids do not commit crimes, and that's what you do, deal with crimes, criminals.
Thank you very much for the report. We appreciate it.
Great
It's
job.
great work. It's really great work. So let's go to back to item 2B.
Item 2B, Inspector General's verbal report and discussion relative to the investigative oversight of the department's non-categorical use of force investigations and possible board action.
Thank you, Commissioners. Commissioner Johnson asked me to discuss briefly my office's review of the department's uses of force. And as way of background, I wanted to just put out some of the general numbers that we see, the averages from year to year. For categorical use of force incidents, which approximate about 100 a year, it makes up about 5% of all the uses of force that the department is involved in. And those are generally, as the commission know, officer-involved shootings and custody deaths, force resulting in hospitalization, other serious uses of force. The bulk of the remaining uses of force are categorized as non-categorical uses of force, and on average are approximately 1,800 a year, and they represent the 95% of the uses of force. So as the commission knows, that my office will thoroughly analyze every serious categorical use of force. We're there at the very beginning and follow the entire investigation to its completion, which results in an independent report from my office to the commission. And then put that in perspective, in 2015, there were 48 officer-involved shootings, and my staff was at the scene at every one of them, reviewed and critiqued each investigation and provided analysis for each to the commission for closed session. in addition to looking at these categoricals on a case-by-case basis, we will also look at the trends for these incidences, such as suicide by cop or mental health-related incidents, and oftentimes do public reports that'll be before the commission. And over the last several years, we've done several other reports on categorical uses of force, such as the one that's on the agenda today. Although my office does extensive analysis on the categorical uses of force, the review for the lesser uses of force are often conducted through audits and investigations from the other sections as well as use of force. We previously performed an extensive review on the department's non-categorical review process and recommended several changes to the system. That report, I believe, was in excess of a year ago. But because of the volume of non-categoricals, my use of force section as currently comprised doesn't have the ability to regularly look at those lesser uses of force, nowhere near to the level that categorical uses of force are, but right now only by sporadic audits.
Thank you. Did you have anything you wanted to add, or? You don't have to. I'm going to make a motion, but if there's a, okay. As noted by the Inspector General, categorical use of force garner the most of the public's attention, but they only represent a small fraction of the department's total use of force, as Inspector General stated, about 5%. As also noted by the Inspector General, his office currently audits non-categorical uses of force. However, after consulting with the Inspector General, I believe the Commission's oversight needs to be increased in all uses of force cases. So I'm making a motion that we direct the Inspector General to strengthen his use of force section by increasing the number of investigators in that section and providing increased and regular oversight over all aspects of the department's non-categorical use of force.
Second.
How can they do that? I mean, how many of them are there?
Well, we're not asking him to look at the non-cats in the same manner that he looks at the cats, but I think he should have more resources so we can look at a greater number of the non-cats.
And how would you do that?
It would be a series of investigations or audits more regularly. If the use of force section is handling it, then they would come up with a strategy to sample and audit in a bunch of different ways and investigate in a bunch of different ways on a regular basis. So unlike the manner in which it's being done right now, which is much more sporadic and spread out through the different sections, it would be part of the full-time responsibilities for the use of force section under Assistant Inspector General Django Sibley, who would come up with and design a system for meaningfully testing and auditing of those processes to determine if, like the categoricals, if there are any concerns, any issues, or anything that we can do to strengthen up the process.
And would that be done in conjunction with the department, or just be done by you guys?
Well, most of our investigations, Commissioner, as you're aware, are done solely by us, since we're the independent oversight entity for you. But what we will do is, as we've done with use of force, is we continually interact with the department. I mean, Django Sibley's team is very well entrenched is the wrong word, but cooperates with the department and shares some of the information. Obviously, there's some things that we will not share and we don't feel is necessary to share when we perform an investigation. But we do regularly go to the department and consult with them and give them our thoughts on particular areas, as we have done in the last few years.
So we've had no oversight of non-categorical uses of force.
That is not what I said, sir.
No, I'm saying, no, just explain to me again.
Sure.
I'm just trying to get it clear.
Well,
I haven't heard about this at all, so just explain it a little more. What do you see?
Well, Mr. Bustamante, do you want to re-explain what you currently do
Sure.
and what you could do with additional resources?
That's all.
So 99% of my resources right now are spent on categorical uses of force. We're on call, go to each one of the scenes, spend most of our resources managing the approximately 100 categorical uses of force that happen each year. And so that responsibility really drains the use of force section. And outside of occasional reports on categorical uses of force, it limits their ability to look at non-cats in kind of a structured way. And since they have the expertise on use of force, since they are looking at it over and over and over again, and they have
the background for this, it makes sense to push some of the resources from other sections into there so that they can now begin to use some of that expertise in the analysis of the non-categorical uses of force.
Chief, department, it seems to make sense, but what am
Well-
I missing? Anything? Chief, any comment on this?
Well, of course, the Inspector General, has the right and authority to look at many of the functions of the department, and non-CATs are one of those. I would just ask that we work with the department and find a way to do this in a way that is fair, because there are obviously the Inspector General is not going to look at 1,800 of these incidents. That is fair. Work with my audit division to find a way that is fair to select the audit samples, and do this in a way that is equitable for the police officers.
May I speak to the motion, please?
Sure.
Thank you. Just in terms of the motion that's put forward, I'd like to first say thank you, Commissioner Johnson, and I appreciate the the Inspector General's report. What is, I think, clear and noteworthy is the fact of the matter is most of the engagement that our officers have with the public do not result in categorical uses of force. So in order to better understand and to ensure that we are in fact mindful of appropriate recommendations as it relates to those interactions, it's clear to me that broadening the oversight and the review that the Inspector General's office is currently undertaking is important. Certainly, it will be very important that there be an agreed upon, or stated differently, an appropriate and fair way of determining how this is actually implemented, and I trust that the Inspector General's office will proceed in that manner, but I just wanted to indicate my absolute conviction that that really this is where the rubber meets the road as it relates to contact, and it's very, very important that we direct appropriate resources and attention in this space.
I know we have one public comment on this item. Anything my fellow commissioners would like to add, or the department?
I just have one other thing to say. I'm for it if it's done right. And the way it should be done right, I'm not for it if it's done wrong. And I think that this is a specific case where, like the chief says, there needs to be discussion, ongoing discussion of these issues as they arise. We can maintain our independence with knowledge, but maintaining our independence in a vacuum without constant back and forth, like the chief says, I think it's fine. I trust that we'll do it right, so I'm going to vote for it.
And Commissioner, if I can just allay some of those fears, we report directly to you, so the subcommittee on use of force will get the constant briefings. If that subcommittee indicates that it wants us to do something different, we will do that as much. But as it goes with all of our investigations, to maintain the independence and to be able to do the investigations in a way, we report to you, and we will solely report to you when it comes to doing the investigations. So if the commission wants us to do something differently, they can always act as a body and tell us to do something differently, but until such, we will perform our investigations in a way that we maintain our independence and are able to.
For it to be done differently.
I'm just saying, sir, I just wanted to clarify that we will go through the subcommittee.
For it to be done, right. Yeah, okay. Okay.
Well, I'm asking for it to be done.
Yeah, right, but it's not different than what he says
It
they're
is-
already doing.
well,
Except you're expanding it.
Correct.
Yeah, it's
Correct.
fine.
Do you want, would you like to call the?
We have Mr. Ted Hayes.
It was a ruse. It was ridiculous, but no one here said a word about the format.
We're changing the color scheme in the next report.
beg your pardon?
We've already discussed that.
In that brochure about categorical use of force, there was a photograph of a black and white police car with 5 bullet holes in the windshield. That photograph was replicated, repeated, printed 3 times in that brochure. The question is whether those bullets incoming bullets or outgoing bullets. Logically, they would be outgoing because that's a use of force on the part of police officers. But we're given to believe that this was the police saying we were being shot at. In other words, to reverse the whole concept about use of force, about our using use of force, but use of force being used against lethal use of force, mind you, against police officers. I want to know, this is a request for information, what that picture actually depicts. Police shooting through a windshield, unless they had glasses on, that's a crazy thing to do. Or someone firing into the windshield of a police car. We need to know. But why was the picture shown 3 times in the brochure? We need to know that also. What are you trying to emphasize by doing that? But more importantly, the bar graphs I still cannot interpret. I still cannot interpret the pie graphs. I don't know gray from medium gray to dark gray to light. I don't know that, and no one else can make those
Mr. Hayes, your
distinctions
point
either.
was well taken when the report came out, and we will definitely make the
I'll
color
bring the
scheme.
graphs next week.
There are no other comment cards.
Any other additional comments? We have a motion and a second on the floor. No? Then I'll call the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Which item would you like to pull
We're
now?
good. I need to compose myself, sorry.
Laughing is okay.
We'll go to item 2C. I'd like to, before the Inspector General makes his report, I'd like to make a brief statement on this item. The LAPD is the finest police force in the nation, and it is the Police Commission's job to ensure that it not only continues to be seen that way now, but grows in stature well into the future. LAPD officers of all ranks and assignments are regularly sought after and consulted by police agencies and governments around the world for their expertise in every facet of policing, from training to investigating homicides, to counterterrorism, to domestic violence or mental health, to fraud and identity theft, and to social media and community engagement. Still, any healthy organization must pause every now and again to do some self-examination and make sure that it's using the best and most current methods, giving its employees the best tools, and meeting the public's expectations as well as its own. And even the best organizations can benefit from looking to their peers for insight or lessons learned. I know that LAPD is not afraid to look in the mirror or look to its sister agencies for best practices. In fact, one of the LAPD's core values is quality through continuous improvement. It's written right up there on the wall. This report from the Inspector General and his staff represents an important part of that continual learning process. The department must always strive to be the best in the nation. That means that we must constantly reevaluate what we are doing and be willing to be self-critical so that we are always moving forward, always improving. These recommendations represent the desire to improve, be more transparent about use of force incidents, provide better training and support to our officers to improve their safety, and reduce the need for serious uses of force. The recommendations that my fellow commissioner, Sandra Figueroa Villa, and I crafted are just another step in the commission and department's systematic review of the entire use of force process. The LAPD is already examining use of force policies and training from across the nation, and the commission has directed the Office of the Inspector General to also review national standards for policing to identify additional areas for improvement, and we eagerly await that report. The Police Commission is committed to providing the officers of this department with the leadership, tools, and the most cutting-edge and realistic training available. The type of training that takes officers out of the classroom, away from the computer, and puts them in the role-playing situations that are as close as possible to real-life interactive scenarios. This allows the officers to experience potentially volatile situations in a controlled environment where nobody's safety is at risk, and the department can reinforce concepts like officer safety and preservation of life in a realistic way. Much has also been made about my recent statements about building a process to receive input on a revised video release policy. As the civilian oversight body for the LAPD, but increasingly for law enforcement agencies themselves, we find ourselves unable to justify not releasing more information to the public about the most critical incidents faced by our officers and the community. Just look around the nation and this state. When it comes to serious uses of force, I believe we have an obligation to provide the public with as much accurate information as is responsible under the circumstances. This information is vitally important in strengthening trust and demonstrating that the department serves and is ultimately responsible to the public. At the same time, we also must listen to and hear our officers. Their perspective is essential to this process, and no policy change or process can be truly effective if it doesn't better support internal accountability and transparency as well. It is only by considering all points of view that we can truly begin to move forward toward a fair and more just system. The public demands it, our officers deserve it. I'll now turn it over to the Inspector General to talk about his report and recommendations. I look forward to discussing your feedback and next steps.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sandra Figueroa Villa.
I said some of what I wanted. But I did want to share.
Sure.
Yeah. The commission and the department are ultimately accountable to the public, and therefore it is important that we are constantly self-critical so that we are always improving. We are also responsible for our officers, who have one of the most difficult and dangerous jobs in the country. After a shooting occurs, there are often questions from the community, and rightfully so, about what happened and whether the shooting was necessary. I believe transparency is vitally important in addressing those concerns. I also want to make sure that we do not lose sight of the impact such incidents have upon our officers and their families. We have a responsibility to them. We have a responsibility to always ensure that we are taking care of their health and welfare after an incident, and that requires us to constantly revisit. We are providing the necessary time, counseling, training, or support to assist them. The department, I know, is constantly assessing how it can improve support to officers, as it should. You said this already, but I'll say it again. We should look around the country in an effort to ensure that we are doing absolutely everything to help them. We must also pay attention to the training officers receive before an incident. Cutting-edge training is essential for officer safety and essential for assisting officers in responding to situations. Not every situation can be de-escalated. Many times, officers will have to use deadly force to defend themselves and others. Many times, there is not enough time to react without endangering oneself or the public. De-escalation, however, is very important in situations where there is the time and space to accomplish it. We must continually teach officers to distinguish between the two scenarios and give them the tools and training to effectively de-escalate a situation whenever possible. This additional training and support not only benefits our officers, it directly benefits the community as well. When we train our officers to approach every situation with the goal of resolving it as safely as possible for everyone involved, as well as give them the tools necessary to do so, we will get better outcomes on both sides. Reducing the amount of force used by officers is beneficial not only to individuals they are interacting with, but it can also increase officer safety. More importantly, this outcome helps strengthen the essential trust between the department and the community more broadly. It is important that we consider the impact of our decisions on both the public and the officers, and I believe these recommendations will do just that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Will you post both of those on our website? Because they're very well done. Your
Thank you.
speech, Matt, and also Sanders, is that possible?
Yes, it is
Yes.
possible. We will do that.
Commissioners, thank you. As you know, because you directed my office to perform this report, we sent a team of 3 IG personnel to the various departments. Spent a lot of time looking at the various departments and the way they did things, and looked at some of the things that the LAPD has done. During this time, and this is kind of a continuation of the 10-year report that we've done previously, we've been interacting with Chief Villegas and have very frank and open conversations, and found a willing partner in that regard, and we'll continue to interact with him. But I'm going to actually hand it over to one of the team members that were at these different departments and was the principal architect for the report. That's Alexa Daniels, and sitting next to her is Assistant Inspector General Django Sibley.
Good morning. Or
Thank you.
afternoon now.
Oh, right. I'm Alexa Daniels-Spall with the Office of the Inspector General. This morning, I'd like to highlight some of the major findings from the report you have in front of you, and then we're available to answer any questions that you may have. But before I begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank the agencies that we visited. Their openness and continued assistance as we completed this report was very important, and without their help, it wouldn't have been possible. So in a nutshell, this report describes the different use of force policies, investigative procedures, review processes, and training at 5 selected agencies, including the LAPD. The information we've provided in this report is based on our discussions with agency representatives, including command staff and training cadres, a review of all the relevant policies and training materials we were able to compile, and finally, our own personal observations at each agency's reality-based training. So since the LAPD is by far the largest of all the organizations that we reviewed for this report, we first wanted to provide a context for the comparison. To do this, we looked at the sizes of the various departments, and then we also looked at the total numbers of officer-involved shootings as well as homicides occurring in those jurisdictions. And what we found was that the LAPD actually ranks in the middle range for most of these measures when you take into account the populations of the jurisdictions. The first area that we looked at was the use of force policies at each of the selected agencies, and we found that all of them, including the LAPD's, are based on the objective reasonableness standard. We also found that some of the policies include other concepts like de-escalation or using deadly force only as a last resort. While these concepts are not currently included in the use of force policy for the LAPD, they are included in the LAPD's current training curriculum for use of force, and as the Commission is aware, the Department's in the process of revising the use of force policy to include some of these concepts as well. So the next areas that we looked at were the investigation, adjudication, and oversight of officer-involved shooting incidents. One main difference we found was that for many agencies, OIS investigations are conducted by detectives from internal affairs, homicide, or another investigative agency or division. Of the agencies reviewed for this report, only the LAPD and Las Vegas have dedicated units that specialize in these types of investigations. And in fact, after surveying the investigative approaches by the different agencies, we found LAPD's investigations and administrative review process to be among the most extensive. LAPD's Force Investigation Division actually puts on trainings to teach investigators from other agencies how to do these specialized types of investigations. And the detectives we met with in Las Vegas actually told us they had attended the training and found it really valuable. So that was some interesting
And actually,
feedback.
Las Vegas was a direct lift from FID.
Yeah.
It's a direct copy.
So in terms of oversight, we found that no other agency shares the LAPD's model with OIG involvement throughout the process and then final adjudication by an independent body, the Commission. Most of the agencies use what are called civilian review boards, which are generally advisory in nature, or some of the agencies have included some other form of civilian involvement in their internal review process. One area that we did find some different approaches was how the different agencies release information to the public about OIS incidents. Of all the agencies that we visited, the process used by Las Vegas really stood out. On the same day as the incident, a YouTube video is posted giving a brief summary of what occurred, and then within the week, a media briefing is held where they present all of the information learned thus far in the investigation, including showing video evidence that's been recovered. Now, of course, the laws related to public records in Nevada are different from California. But as we've seen, recent release of video by a few California agencies in the last few weeks and months may indicate changes in how these laws are interpreted by different agencies here. Another interesting development in California, of course, is the protocol in San Diego County, where video evidence of OIS investigations will be released by the district attorney's office following their review. And so far, 15 agencies in the region have signed on to that protocol. As part of looking at the OIS investigations, we also spoke to the different agencies about the processes they use for returning officers to the field following an OIS. We found that at all the agencies, including the LAPD, the agencies require officers to be assessed by a mental health professional prior to returning to work. But on top of this mandatory assessment, we learned that officers in Dallas and Las Vegas must also complete an individualized reality-based training course, and they must also re-qualify with their duty weapon before they can return to work. We also looked at how each of the agencies provide information and support to their officers during the course of the investigation and adjudication process. We found officer support resources vary agency to agency, but one interesting thing we found was that in Las Vegas, they have a relatively formalized system for keeping officers informed of the process of the investigation. So this system includes not only preparing the officers before any information about the incident is released to the public, but also giving them a preview of the investigative findings before the administrative review at a use of force review board. And on top of that, the department conducts regular status checks with the officers to see how they're doing and to make sure they understand what's going on in the process. So the final area that we looked at was training, use of force training at all of these agencies. We were particularly interested to see how they teach de-escalation skills and strategies and what teaching methods they use to accomplish this. I want to state up front that this report by no means covers all the training courses at all these agencies that touch on use of force tactics or de-escalation concepts. There are many, many different trainings. We simply wanted to provide some examples to show the different approaches for this type of training. The LAPD has several training courses that discuss de-escalation skills and concepts, as do the other agencies that we visited. For this report, we chose to highlight training courses for patrol officers that not only discuss the tactics that may be used to de-escalate an incident, such as communications or the use of less lethal weapons, but courses that also teach officers the strategies of how to employ those tactics so they can reduce the level of force necessary to resolve the incident. Now, in looking at this training, we also found that all five agencies use reality-based training, but they do it in their own individual ways. So, for example, Dallas has created kind of a serial scenario where the circumstances will change for each scenario as the officer progresses through the series. In Washington, D.C., the scenarios include bystanders who are filming the incident on their cell phone and will attempt to interfere with the officers as they're trying to resolve the incident. San Diego's reality-based training focuses on working as a team and coordinating the officers' actions to resolve the incident. And finally, the LAPD uses a stress vest technology to make the experience even more realistic. So this technology allows officers to know if they've been hit by the suspect fire and vice versa. One thing that we did find differing among the agencies was the frequency that officers were cycled through reality-based training courses. Many of the agencies we visited administer use of force training centrally and to most or all of their officers on a regular basis. And in some cases, they even do this on an annual or biannual cycle. So in conclusion, we found that all the agencies we visited, including the LAPD, have different approaches in all these areas. And of course, the report provides a lot more detail on all of them. And at the end of the report, you'll find recommendations that were formulated by Commissioners Johnson and Figueroa Villa for the full commission's consideration today. And we're happy to answer any questions that you have about the report.
Thank you very much. And I know you put in a ton of work on this, and I know there were multiple drafts with additional questions that we sent you back to get information on. Your hard work and your team's hard work on this is very much appreciated. And personally, I thought this was an excellent report. I've asked most of my questions, but I will I do have a couple of additional, but any
Is there
questions?
anybody else up there that wants to speak before we ask questions? Arif, do you have anything to say on, do you guys have anything? Is that okay to hear that?
Sure, of
that
course,
side also?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Commissioners. I think that Commissioner Johnson, you stole a little bit of my thunder with respect to the response to, the department's response. Clearly, one of our core values is quality to continuous improvement, and we believe we are the best at this training business that we're in, and at the investigations of use of forces and the adjudication and all of those processes that were discussed in this report. But we will take a look at ourselves, we will critique ourselves, and we will improve ourselves. We will work collaboratively with the Inspector General's office and the Use of Force Committee to continuously improve and to make and improve our processes. Having said that, though, I'd want to make a couple of things clear I think are important as we move forward and continue to improve. With respect to training, we are in the process now of developing that training plan. Part of that was as a result of the 12 recommendations from the previous report. Certainly, the Inspector General and I have had numerous conversations as it relates to use of force. We've had conversations with respect to the training component within the Use of Force Committee. Based on all of those conversations and those recommendations, we're going to have a very robust training plan that I believe this commission will accept and adopt. Some of those key concepts within there is to ensure that we have a balanced approach in our training. Much emphasis in this report was with respect to reality-based training, and we have reality-based training. We do reality-based training. We also do scenario-based training. We also do facilitation, and we do training with respect to lecture. So there's going to be a balance in all of that. It will not be exclusively reality-based training because that's just simply not reasonable with an organization of our size and the scope of what we do. De-escalation, as we mentioned, is embedded in most of our training, but we are coming up with a de-escalation tactical directive that's going to be disseminated to everyone that's very close to being signed off and sent off, and then that will be incorporated in all training. That will include modifications to most of the courses that we already have, and as we've spoken about that, it's going to be difficult, and we're going to do some timing on it to make sure that it continues to be post-certified, as we are, POST is the certification body for us. With respect to return to duty, the GTU, and we're going to take a look at that process as well, make sure that it's consistent with the spirit of what's written in this report, and but we do reality-based training within GTU now. So we're going to look at that and see how we can modify it so that it works mostly. One of the issues with respect to return to duty was the discussion in the report that talked about the officers receiving medical counseling.
Psychological counseling.
Psychological counseling. We do that now. The premise for us is that we direct an employee on a policy basis to see a psychologist. How long that employee sees the psychologist is determined upon the psychologist's assessment and the psychologist's view. In many, many cases, although they may be returned back to the field, the psychologist continues to see the officer.
But currently it's one mandatory session, then the psychologist will then determine whether additional sessions are mandated.
Correct.
I mean, personally, I feel that, and then, of course, if the officer desires additional counseling sessions, they can request it, and that's available for them.
Correct.
I just think, frankly, with the culture of an organization like this, people are not that likely to ask for help. So I would prefer, I know obviously this is one of the areas that we're asking you to look at specifically and come back to us, but personally it's my belief that there should be a greater number than one mandatory session to make sure. These are traumatic events. I don't care who you are, I don't care what experience you may have had, whether you were in the military and involved in all kinds of combat. These are traumatic events, and one mandatory session did not seem adequate to me.
We agree, and I think that
maybe we could, my chief psychologist is Diana talk a little bit here. And in respect to his mental well-being, I think it'd probably be a good idea.
You gotta come back 3 times. Remember, 1 is not enough. You can't do it right now.
Well, to add, Dr. Kevin Jablonski, the Chief Psychologist, Commanding Officer, Behavioral Science Services, to add what the Chief was just speaking to. 1 session is mandated, but the psychologist conducts an evaluation of the individual's response, psychological response to the shooting incident. How are they thinking? How are they sleeping? Are they having intrusive thoughts? Are they having changes in behavior? If that psychologist has any concerns about that person, the psychologist is authorized to direct that person to return. And so in that sense, we have something that a lot of departments don't have, which is that opportunity for the mental health expert, my staff, to conduct the evaluation and to basically prescribe, if I may use that term, as many sessions as is necessary to provide assistance. We have a lot of individuals who, in fact, will use that as the gateway, as the open door to say, you know, coming to BSS wasn't as scary as I thought it was. Can I come back and address other issues? And so it's actually good for our self-referred business as well.
Thank you.
And Kevin, why don't you tell me a little bit about the trip your folks made to Dallas and some of the things that you guys worked on?
So 2 things. One, most recently, with the incident that occurred in Dallas, they were overwhelmed by that, as you can imagine. And so there was an offer of mutual assistance from Chief Moore and Chief Villegas to Dallas. Initially, they thought they could handle it. A couple weeks later, we got a request for assistance, and we sent 2 of our police psychologists. So Dr. Stephanie McKinney and Dr. Edric Dorian both went out there for 5 days, went out to provide psychological debriefing to groups of individuals following that incident. And not only did they do that, but they did a lot of individual counseling, if you will, for folks. And with the expertise and the tenure and the experience that our staff have, being as large as we are and being the oldest law enforcement psychological services in the country, they were also able to provide consultation on the operation itself. How do you organize a response to a traumatic incident like that that can overwhelm a department? So in that regards, we provided a level of assistance there. When I was on vacation in Paris about 3 months ago, I was able to meet with the chief psychologist and the chief physician and talk to them about the experiences that they have in regards to the terrorist attacks and how do they provide medical and psychological assistance to the nation, because they have a national police force. But also, even in that, what they stressed and what I believe we actually have in place is the organizational structure to basically call to service all of our team at BSS to provide psychological assistance should that be the need in those kind of incidents as well. And Chief Villegas has actually directed that we actually look at that and codify that, so we're working on that at this time.
And I just want to point that out that you know, Kevin works very closely with other folks in the profession that service police agencies, and you know, this is something that I think we have the finest psychs in the business. And you know, not to say that we can't look at what we do and there may be another number to be attached or whatever, but I have a lot of faith in their wanting to push the envelope forward, and there are also their desire to keep this organization healthy.
I just have a quick question. So the first meeting, they come to get a psychological assessment, and then you assess whether they need follow-up or not, our officers. When they come back, who does the actual service? Is it a psychologist, MSW, who does that?
It's always a licensed psychologist in the LAPD.
And how many do you have, Kevin? Don't say not enough.
So we have 14 if you count 3 supervisory staff, and at the moment we're looking to hire and fill 2 additional positions this year.
Thank you.
And within the spirit of improvement, one of the things that the BSS team has already done is to look at ways to improve their debriefing process, as well as to look at how, if there was that magic number, and they have internal recommendations that are going to come to fruition with respect to addressing this particular issue already, because they were already doing that in the front end of that.
One more quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you offer, if the officer needs more, do you offer a session for the family?
BSS will provide psychological services to spouse significant other, but not to children or dependent children.
But
We
how
will
come none of
certainly
this was
make-
in the report? How come you guys didn't, have you heard any of this before?
It's briefly described, sir, accurately on page 14, page 13 and 14 of the report.
What they said?
The issue is, that, you know, I know we have, it was very clear in the report that that we have great services that are available. But one of my concerns was that, was one that I've already mentioned, is that there's only one mandatory session. Someone could have a great session and frankly pull the wool over your eyes, and you don't really see the trauma that they're going through, that if there was a second or a third session, you might actually see. And two, it seemed that that the LAPD, if someone is involved in the use of force in the LAPD, they're back in the field. And I don't mean, you know, necessarily sitting at a desk. I mean in the field in a patrol car much faster than the other agencies, and that's concerning to me. And so that this is definitely something I am anxious for a report back on, so we can look into it.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I'm very much interested in the report back and in taking a comprehensive look at not only the IG's, you know, the document that the IG's provided, which was illuminating and useful, but also spending some time evaluating the department's response, which I imagine will be equally comprehensive. My only observation, and I want to be a little delicate about this, there is no perfect institution, and no one is the greatest and the best and the most comprehensive at everything all the time. It is difficult, and frankly, that extends to not just the department, but to this commission. There's room for improvement to go all the way around. It is difficult to evaluate the openness to either question, critique, or change when so much time is spent in response to everything, reiterating that we are the absolute best. I suspect, in fact I know, that this department is quite exceptional. That is, from my perspective, not at issue. What I also know is that we have an obligation to constantly review and determine if there are ways that we can be better. And I trust that that will be done and will continue to be done without resistance. So as I said, I appreciate the report, the recommendations, and I am looking forward to the department's response. Thanks.
And nobody, certainly nobody that works for me believes that this organization is perfect as formed. And we constantly strive, and I think the commission president's comments reflected that. I think my comments to the media reflected that we're always open to other institutions to learn. Even when we go to teach, we go to learn. And so that is a constant theme with this department. So we are justifiably proud of the organization. Don't mistake that for a reluctance to change. Just recognize it for what it is, an organization that's come a very long way and is proud of that journey, but recognizes that the journey is not over.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I think I'll close my comments as it relates to the issues that I oversee within the Office of Administrative Services by saying that there is no resistance to change, none whatsoever. In fact, we are the best and we are exceptional because we're not resisting to change, and we're going to continuously look to improve ourselves and make ourselves even better.
you have something to add?
Thank you. R.F. Ali Khan, Director of Constitutional Policing and Policy for the department. With respect to the policy issues that are raised in the report and some of the previous reports, I just wanted to note a couple of things. One in particular talked about the importance of advising the officers of the process. And it can often be bewildering, especially for a new officer fresh out of the academy who may have been involved in the categorical use of force. We have already been developing a set of materials that we plan to distribute at the general training update, which of course happens immediately after the use of force occurs. That's in process because what we've often found is I think we've overly relied on the officer's representative to keep them informed of the process, and it's incumbent upon us to do that. So that is already in the works. With respect to the video release policies, I think everybody's aware of the chief's direction on that we have been looking at a variety of different ways to look at the appropriate type of disclosure within the context of the entire of the incident. We've been in contact with Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department about the way they do it and also understanding their legal requirements to produce records, which is much more expansive than what we're required to in California. But as one of the methods to do that, and of course the ongoing discussions we've been having with the LA District Attorney's Office and their primary concern about maintaining the integrity of the case should in fact they want to bring a prosecution against an officer and trying to balance all of those. So we will certainly go forward. On the use of force policies, part of what I have is a bit of a question simply because. Yeah.
Actually, just on that last point. So in the last 2 years and let's not even deal with 2016, let's deal with 2014, 2015. How many cases has the district attorney prosecuted related to officer-involved shootings?
Well, officer-involved shootings, they have not. However, there have been other cases involving video evidence of civil rights abuses and assault under color of law.
But we're talking about officer-involved shootings here, so 0 in the last 2 years. Okay, and then I'm curious as to what Las Vegas said, because obviously they have this issue and they released this video in 72 hours. What did they talk about? What concerns did that raise for them? Was this problematic for them in terms of not just the prosecution side, but just the investigation side in general?
They honestly didn't really raise any issues related to releasing information. And in fact, when we were having discussions about that topic, there were representatives there from the officers union, and they also didn't raise any issues.
Of course, I would add that I've talked directly to the prior chief of the department, Sheriff Gillespie, and he did have issues with it, and I believe that Nevada state law is part of the reason they do this.
And similar to your question, President Johnson, I'd also want to know how often the district attorney in Las Vegas has prosecuted cases and what effect release has on doing so. But as you know, we're all bound by different laws and different dynamics, so I think it's just important that we balance all of the interests in whatever policy that the commission approves.
No question about it.
With respect to the use of force policy and the discussion in the IG's report about the last resort and exhaustion of reasonable alternatives, as you know, we've been directed with specific language that the commission wants us to negotiate, and we are in that meet and confer process. There is some variation from what we're being directed and what's mentioned in the report that I think warrants some discussion. We did not have the opportunity to see the report until it was released on Friday or Thursday afternoon. So that's something that I think is necessary. We've been doing extensive research throughout the country with other police departments, myself personally, with legal scholars, et cetera, to learn about what they're doing and also having some discussions about how we need to tighten up our policy. I, for one, having been new to the department and examining these issues, especially from a legal point of view, think that there are some opportunities to be both more restrictive on our use of deadly force policy and also be more clear, especially with the terminology of using the last resort. One thing that's pointed out in the report in the last resort language is what Dallas uses as an example, and on page 7 of the report it indicates deadly force will be used with great restraint and as a last resort only when the level of resistance warrants the use of deadly force. Well, the LAPD, we do not allow deadly force based on the level of resistance. It is only allowed, in my opinion, only under the law when there's an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury. So the issue really is, and something I've been proposing internally and externally, is that the phrasing really should not be the last resort. It should be the only resort, because it's only permissible under the law, under our policy, and under the state of California if there's an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury. So these are some of the issues that we would like to explore with the commission and with the IG now that the report has been released, to see if there are improvements
Isn't this
that
what
can
we're
be made.
doing in the use of force subcommittee in our meetings?
We certainly can. Our discussions, I think, up until now have been focused on the meet and confer issues. But what I'm talking about is possibly going beyond what's being directed. And I have to be careful because I don't want to talk about too much, since obviously we have labor negotiations. I think that would be useful. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions?
You know, the only other thing I'd ask of the commission is, and we'll report back on the personnel issue aspects, but you know, my office has to balance multiple conflicting requests and requirements for personnel, and to carve out one command and make them exempt from vacancies is very difficult. So we'll just have to discuss that more, so that I have a better understanding of what my vacancy rate is there, and then what the impact on the other commands would be should I fill them all quickly. And you know, obviously would love the Los Angeles Police Department to be fully staffed, but it's not. So I have to balance those personnel issues. So that's all I would ask, and we can bring that back to you when in the time frame that this report asks for.
Okay, so are you okay with the so you're referring to items 5 and 6, I think, on the in the report on the recommendations?
Yeah, absolutely. Fill all the PTSB vacancies, and then the training coordinator and assistant training coordinator positions are filled. So, you know, some of those are, well, let me get back to you when we look at what all what the true vacancy rates are there and how big an impact it would be. I just.
Well, why don't we'll keep the motion as is, and then you can, in 45 days, report back, and we'll see where we are. And
no, I have no trouble with the motion. I just
okay.
As you guys well know, you know, we add units every day around here, and they got to come from someplace. So.
I don't have any trouble with the motion either. My only question to you, because you guys wrote it, we got it last Thursday. Had you had the input that you had today, would there have been any changes, or do you want to make any modifications to any of the recommendations? If that's just a question. I'm not recommending one or the other, but my question is, if you would have had this information, would your recommendations have stood? Maybe they would. I mean, I'm okay with them, but. No, I'm talking to the commission. I'm talking, you guys wrote the recommendations.
I have no
to you
change.
and Sandy.
No, sorry.
Okay. So based on this.
I am fine with the recommendations as
Okay,
written.
and Sandy, same? Okay.
Sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
realize that was
Okay.
directed at me. Okay.
Can I say something? So we can call the question?
I'd just like to thank
Commissioner Grossman.
Commissioner Johnson and Sandra for your leadership on this, and appreciate the recommendations, and particularly appreciate the in-depth recommendation for public input on the video release policy, and want to emphasize what is written here about making sure that the community is truly and deeply engaged in that process. And I've had the privilege of attending several roll calls and ride-alongs in the last few days, and have heard a lot from officers about these issues, and I'm also very glad to see in the recommendation deep engagement of officers' perspectives in that process, which are diverse and vital. I've also gotten to hear from a number of officers over the last few days about a couple other issues that I see highlighted in this report. One is making sure that officers are provided with sufficient information throughout the process when they're under review for uses of force, and how difficult it can be when that information isn't provided. So I'm glad to see that in there, as well as the importance of the mental health and other types of support after a shooting and making sure that that's provided in a way that, from the officers that I heard from who did receive that kind of support, it made all the difference and was vitally important, and just want to make sure that it's, done in a way that is supportive and not felt to be in any way punitive or anything like that. So I'm really glad to see those perspectives represented here. I appreciate your work on it.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? Do we have any public comment on this item?
No, sir.
Do I have a motion to approve the recommendations in this report?
I move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Again, thank you for your great work on this.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. This brings us to item 2F.
Yes, sir.
Did any of my fellow commissioners want to report on this item? No?
Okay, we do have one comment card.
Okay, call the comment, please.
Ted Hayes.
Governor Jerry Brown, on September 28th, signed legislation that requires law enforcement officials to notify adults if they have been placed on a gang database and gives them the opportunity to challenge their inclusion and request removal. It goes on to point out that children as young as 1 year old were placed on a database as a gang member. A recent audit released by the state of California shows that shared gang databases are overly broad, horribly incorrect, and illegally share information threatening individuals' privacy and opportunities. In addition to law enforcement officials, employment and housing are also jeopardized by this. Anyway, the governor is alerted to the fact that these gang databases can be disastrous even though they're not actually law. And so he wants to review the entire thing, and I think it's important that the department hold off on utilizing these things until they can make reforms that the governor thinks are appropriate. One of which is, how can you get off? And more importantly, how do you get on? How does a 1-year-old child get on a gang database, except that it's so irrational? How it functions is not logical, nor is it useful as far as law enforcement is concerned.
There are no other comment cards, sir.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. So that brings us to item 2G.
We have no comment cards on this item.
I would actually like a report on this item.
Department's report dated September 28, 2016, relative to the Air Support Division Audit, AD number 15-091.
We can skip the report. We can just go right to my questions unless someone wants the actual report. So trying to pull up my notes, but on I think it's page 4, there were only it looks like there were only the sample size. There were only 2 audited. Why were there? That just didn't seem like a great sample size. And 50% were.
Yeah, I believe that's all we had during that time period that we looked at for this particular audit. Were the 2 selections.
Okay. So that was for which position? That wasn't for the TFO, that was for the other position? Because there were 68 people for the TFO. I thought.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Lieutenant Darrell Martin, Audit Division. There were 2 positions. One was for tactical flight officer, and the other one was for one command pilot.
So they're actually two separate positions.
Yeah. All right, okay, so I got it. So that was just for the two commanding officer positions, okay. And frankly, this is probably a question for air support, not for audit division. One thing I have learned in the year that I've been here is just how highly sought after these positions are. And we had, and having gone on a few fly-alongs, I understand why. We had 68 people apply for the TFO position. I just found it incredibly troubling that the person selected had a recent and extensive disciplinary history. And if you could comment on that, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, good afternoon, Commissioners. Sean Parker, I'm the captain at Air Support Division. We did identify that selection that we're talking about, and the part of the 15-2 didn't include conversations that Air Support at the time had with the command of that officer. And that personal knowledge and background gained provided additional insight that supported the decision to select an employee. And what I had found was those conversations and those findings were not included in that 15-2. And so in the future, moving forward, certainly from my perspective, those 15-2s will certainly be more comprehensive, and to include a careful review of the officers who is going to be selected, of their teams and their history.
And so when you looked at that, you thought he was still the appropriate candidate to be selected for the position?
Yes, sir.
And Sean, that decision preceded you, correct?
That is correct, Chief.
I note that there were no recommendations in this report, but there was after the report, there was a statement from was it from you or your predecessor?
From the predecessor.
From your predecessor, responding and how these issues were going to be addressed in the future. What are our plans to do a follow-up audit to make sure that those corrections are indeed implemented? Do we have a plan?
Yes, good afternoon. Jeffrey Phillips, Commanding Officer of Audit Division. We can certainly follow up with an inspection. Based on their response, we could follow up with an inspection and determine whether those things they indicated that were going to be done, whether they were in fact done.
How often are TFOs being hired?
Currently, we have 4 in the process. It is more of a protracted training process because it's so competitive, and the vacancies don't come about as often. So we currently are looking to fill 4 TFO positions, so we have 2 in training.
When would be an appropriate time for a follow-up audit to make sure that these improvements are in place?
6 months.
In 6 months?
Yeah, we certainly, the TFO program, because it's highly technical, we do have a high rate of unsuccessful applicants.
Okay.
Sean, explain how you did, and I don't know, maybe the commissioner already knows this, but explain how this works, that folks, you examine them personally in the performance of their jobs before you make the selections.
That is correct. It's a 2-month loan. A lot of moving parts, evaluations on a daily, regular basis, and we put them through some obviously real life scenarios, and there's a lot of pressure, but our expectations are high because of the support that we provide for those units on the ground and the safety for all involved. 2 months, highly critical, but we have found that as a result of that training program, in spite of the high washout rate, our TFOs that do make it are the ones that meet the standards, the high standards of Air Support Division.
And as somebody that's done it a little bit, it's really difficult, and so it's not something for everybody. It's very much an eye and thought coordination process, and I mean this is something where people's performance over that 2 months is really important to Air Support. It's different than almost any other selection we do. Most times we select before you've ever done the job, and then
right. I've talked to people that didn't make it and people that did make it, and definitely appreciate the process to select these individuals.
It's a tough school.
Do we need to make a motion, Mr. T-Fank, to have the follow-up audit, or is that just a?
We can just come back with it.
Okay.
I don't think there's a motion necessary.
Okay, thank you.
The commanding officer of Audit Division said they'll do a follow-up inspection. I think it's just careful to consider an audit or an inspection. They are different. I think you're looking for an inspection rather than another audit.
I just want an inspection on the two items that were obviously this issue and then the issue with, related to,
Training.
exactly.
And starting that inspection in 6 months would suffice, meaning we'll probably be back maybe 7 months.
You gotta make some selections.
Sure.
When's your selections? You
Yeah,
guys have to
exactly.
coordinate so you have something to
Sure.
inspect.
I'll follow up with Audit
Otherwise,
Division.
anything to
Yes, sir.
inspect.
If it's 7, 8, 9 months, just, whenever the reasonable time frame is. I don't want you to come back when it didn't make sense for you to have done.
I'll
the
coordinate with
inspection.
Captain Parker. We'll get it done, sir.
Great, thank you. Any other questions on this item? Okay, do I have thank you for your work. Do we have a motion to approve the report?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
So is 2I the last item then?
Yes.
Did we already did 2H, correct? So I just had a couple of questions on 2I. Do we have, we can skip the report unless any of my fellow commissioners would actually like the report. Bear with me, I forgot my iPad this morning, so I'm working off the computer. So I appreciate the fact that we're expanding the areas that we're looking at from what was originally mandated under the consent decree.
Yes, sir.
And I think that looking at this area is very important to strengthening the public trust. This is probably one of the most important audits that we do. Can you just explain to me, because it didn't seem like we didn't actually audit all of these categories, or at least it didn't appear to me that we did. So can you just explain to me how we're looking at this and how what the format is in terms of what you're looking at when and how frequently?
Absolutely. I'll start it off. Captain Jim Alvarez from Special Operations Division. With me, Lieutenant Michael Donatoni, Detective Linda Compton, who run the Ethics Enforcement Section. So to start off on how we approach our categories, we do review the quarterly disciplinary report, and we identify the top categories from there, which are usually neglect of duty, discourtesies, unbecoming conducts, and we focus our integrity tests with that in mind. So that's our first stop. We receive insight from the various chain of commands throughout the organization, both sworn and civilian, on requests to do an integrity test on a potential at-risk employee.
Mm-hmm.
We receive direction from the Chief of Staff, PSB, the Inspector General's Office, and Chief Beck as well. When we review our complaints, we start off with the Complaint Classification Unit out of Internal Affairs Group. They're the clearinghouse for all complaints in the organization. If their staff sees a case that may require SOD support, be it off-duty allegations, surveillance, technology requests, then they contact my complaint unit, and then we start reviewing the request. We also, under Detective Compton's section, reviews each 128 as well, and I'll let her speak to that review process.
Good afternoon. So my entire section, we review all the 128s that come through the department, except for the ones that are like failure to qualify and things like that. But we read every one of them. And through that, we kind of, if we have something that looks interesting or something that we could actually test, we then take it further and we review the officer and what their background shows us. And then we prepare a request, and then it goes to my captain. So that's one of the ways, by reviewing the 128s. We also assist the investigators. If they feel like they need a test of some sort, we will work with them. So either AID, CID, or even SOD investigators will work with them, and that's another way, as well as getting information from the command officers who will call and have questions and request tests for us.
So based on those reviews, once we identify a particular employee, we do a workup to see what type of criminal, actually complaint investigations they have in the past, see if there's an at-risk employee. We see if we can create a similar situation to address an objective integrity test, and then we go with actually formulating a plan of action. Now, your question about the categories that we look at. We go off of our workforce to see what specific cases we're gonna be testing, specific employees. They can fall into all the categories. It just depends on what the work request is.
So over time, you are auditing in all of these different categories?
We're attempting to audit all the categories, that's correct.
Okay. The recommendation here is to submit the report to the IG to do an analysis and come back to us with any recommendations. I don't have any additional questions. Does anybody else have any questions? No. Do I have a motion? I'll make the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much. And I believe that's it?
We're on item number 3, report of the chief of police.
Oh, sorry.
Chief Beck.
Sorry, Chief.
I'm going to be extremely brief. You know, this is our 13th, wish Sean was here so I can make sure I'm right, 13th week of violent crime reduction in the city, so that's a good thing. We're at 3% reduction in homicides, which is 7. We're at 4.1% reduction in people shot, that's minus 38. We're at a total 5.6 increase in Part 1 crime, and that's steadily been decreasing. So hopefully we'll have a little bit better numbers than that by the end of the year, although, you know, they're not going to shift categories dramatically. Slight increase in gang crime, 3.5%. And, you know, lastly, and I'll skip the personnel stuff because it's pretty much the same as I reported on last week. You know, I just want to talk about how much the Los Angeles Police Department's hearts go out to Sheriff's Department and to Palm Springs. You know, I've been in contact with both organizations at multiple levels, and what they're dealing with is really difficult. You know, we've sent some people to Palm Springs to try to help them out a little bit. You know, it's a really tough thing for a small department like that to have to suffer such a horrific loss, you know, especially of two people at opposite ends of their career that were so iconic within the organization. And then Sergeant Steve Owen, you know, I rode with him in the Rose Parade. He's a great guy, great horseman, and I know his organization and the whole community will miss him horribly. So with that concludes my report.
Any questions for the chief? Do we have any public comment on
We have one public comment card. We have Mr. Hayes.
I've always wondered what the reinstatement aspect of your report is. Who gets out and then anyway? I'd just like to point out something that the commission is engaged in guerrilla warfare. The guerrillas are out here. You are the persons they're attacking. Now, in guerrilla warfare, the opposition who are guerrillas cannot possibly overwhelm their opposition. 10,000 cops. So what they can do is they can deter them. The resistance couldn't stop the Nazis, but they could blow up bridges and railroad tracks and make the Nazis put officers around the bridges and along the tracks. That's why you put all these officers around your bridges. And that's why they exhaust your manpower or woman power. But more importantly, conventional war or guerrilla war, the first casualty is truth. That's the first casualty. So if you show a video showing a man with a gun, doesn't matter whether that's true or not, because the truth goes out the window. In every war, it never is based upon what's true. The winners always determine what the truth is. We know that. But more importantly, I don't think you understand that you're engaged in a guerrilla warfare. Mr. Johnson, when a person is off the subject, they may be crazy, they may be unorganized, they may be deliberate, but you can't make them be sane. You get the population of LA in here. They're allowed to speak their piece for 2 lousy minutes. How often do I have to say 2 lousy minutes? But when you stop everything, clear the room because someone's not speaking on the issue, can't you understand what you're doing is you're disrupting the meeting, sir?
We have no other public comment cards. Now we're on number 4, public comment period. We have Mr. Hayes.
Really, I'd just like to continue where I left off. Because the 2 minutes that we're here is what we have an opportunity to speak our minds. And if our minds are disoriented, if our minds are not reading the agenda and developing some response to the agenda, understand the agenda is only 25 words left to tell you what the topic might be. And if you're skillful at drafting that into a conversation for 2 minutes, go right ahead. But if all you can say is what you know, what you think, that's what you're going to say. But I don't believe Garcetti selected Matt Johnson because he is a good person when it comes to dealing with literature. I say literature because that's where you do essays. What did I do last summer? Some kids do that essay well, some kids do it very poorly. But the instructor is one who knows the elements of a good design. And a good design is not what you are qualified to determine, sir. Leave the people alone for their lousy 2 minutes of fame, huh?
But you know it's not 2 minutes. There were 23 items today, Mr. Hayes. So if you have 2 minutes on every item, that's over 45 minutes per person. We would be here all day and all night. That's why we have these rules. We could adopt the council rules, which limits each speaker to a total of 5 minutes total, but we haven't done that because we've tried to give people a greater opportunity to speak. So you can't, we could not function if we gave everybody 2 minutes on every item to talk about whatever they wanted.
Well, that's a dangerous response you made, sir, because it seems that you're trying to deter people from speaking in the interest of time, rather than the interest of their ability to say their minds. Now, it wasn't time you were talking about, it was content. You're not speaking on the agenda. You're not speaking on the item on the agenda. So what are you concerned about? Time, or using that as a method in which to comprise the time element? I don't understand. But all I'm talking about is let them speak their piece, okay? If 40 of them get up here, and first of all, if 40 get here and take 2 minutes, so be it. But don't tell them, sit down, I'm taking your time away because you're not on the topic. You listen to what happened today. Listen to the tape and see where the interruption took place.
Okay, Mr. Hayes.
And there are no other items on the agenda. Mr. President, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?